The red dust of Redemption Gulch did not just coat the town, it possessed it. It settled in the deep creases of the weather-beaten wooden boardwalks. It clouded the windows of the mercantile, and it found its way into the lungs of every man, woman, and mule within 50 miles of the Colorado border. The wind was a constant, nagging presence, hot and dry, carrying the scent of sagebrush, horse manure, and the metallic tang of desperation. It was 1885, and the town sat on the edge of the frontier like a festering wound, halfway between civilization and absolute savagery. To the east lay the railroads and the law. To the west, up the jagged spine of the mountains, lay the gold mines and the silence of the high country. Redemption Gulch was the purgatory in between. Inside the Painted Mare, the town's largest and most notorious saloon. The air was thick with blue tobacco smoke and the smell of stale beer. It was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but the gloom inside was permanent. Men sat hunched over faro tables, their faces obscured by the shadows of their hat brims, clutching cards with hands that had been shaped by pickaxes and shovels. Lily Hart stood behind the long polished bar, wiping a glass with a rag that had turned gray 3 days ago. 10 years ago, they had called her the Rose of the Rockies. Men had ridden 40 miles just to see her smile. Now, at 32, the town simply called her Lily. The name had lost its floral delicacy, just as she had lost the soft, dewy bloom of youth. She paused to look at her reflection in the mirror behind the rows of amber whiskey bottles. The glass was cracked, splitting her face in two, but she did not need a perfect mirror to know what was there. There were fine lines branching out from the corners of her eyes, like dry riverbeds seeking water. Her skin, once the color of fresh cream, was now tanned and slightly leathery from the relentless sun. Her hair, a cascade of auburn curls that used to bounce when she danced, was pulled back severely, tied with a simple black ribbon. It was a practical style, the style of a woman who no longer had the energy to preen. Her hand moved unconsciously to her neck. A high lace collar hid the skin there, but she could feel the ridge of the scar beneath the fabric. It was a souvenir from a gambler named Silas, a man with a silver tongue and a fist like a hammer. He had promised to take her to San Francisco. Instead, he had taken her dignity and nearly her life before vanishing into the night. "Hey, Lily, another round over here before I die of thirst," a miner shouted from a corner table. Lily did not jump. She did not hurry. She set the glass down and moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Her hips swayed, not with the provocative invitation of the younger girls who worked the floor, but with the heavy rhythm of a pendulum that had been swinging for too long. "Keep your shirt on. Jeb," she said. Her voice was a smoky contralto, roughened by years of breathing dust and cheap tobacco. It was a voice that sounded like it had been soaked in whiskey and dried by a campfire. "You have had enough to kill a horse, but I suppose one more will not finish you." She poured the drink. She did not smile. Smiles were currency in this town, and she was running low on funds. She had been young once. She remembered a boy with eyes the color of the winter sky. He had no money, only a mule and a dream of the mother-lode. They had sat by the creek, and he had promised to build her a house with glass windows. Then the gold fever took him. He left one morning while the mist was still clinging to the pines, leaving no note, no money, just a hole in her chest where her heart used to be. That was 12 years ago. She had stopped waiting for him after the first winter. She had stopped crying after the second. The bat-wing doors of the saloon swung open with a violent creak. Silence rippled through the room, starting at the door and spreading outward until even the piano player froze with his fingers hovering over the keys. Standing in the frame of the sunlight was a silhouette that every man in the room recognized and feared. It was Ravenwolf. He was a warrior of the Lakota, though some said he rode with the Apache now. He was tall, his body lean and corded with a muscle, moving with a silence that made the heavy boots of the miners seem clumsy. He wore buckskins that had seen hard travel, and a single eagle feather was tied into his dark hair. The townspeople called him Indian Trouble. They said his people were the reason the supply wagons disappeared. They said he was a ghost who could walk through walls. He stepped inside. The sunlight died behind him as the door swung shut. "We do not serve your kind here," the bartender, a sweaty man named Dutch, grumbled, his hand inching toward the shotgun under the counter. Ravenwolf did not look at the Dutch. His obsidian eyes swept the room, cold and unreadable. He walked straight to the bar, ignoring the hostile glares of 50 armed white men. He stopped in front of Lily. The tension in the room was tight enough to snap a bowstring. A single wrong move, and the floor would be slick with blood. Lily looked at Dutch and shook her head slightly. She stepped forward, placing herself directly in front of the warrior. "Whiskey?" she asked. Her voice was level. Ravenwolf looked at her. For a fleeting second, the hardness in his eyes fractured. 2 years ago, on the road to Santa Fe, a group of drunken cowboys had cornered Lily's wagon. Ravenwolf had appeared from the rocks like a spirit. He had not killed the men, but he had terrified them so thoroughly that they had left their boots behind when they ran. He had escorted Lily back to the main road and vanished without a word. He nodded once. Lily reached for the good bottle, the one usually reserved for the mayor or the judge. She poured a generous measure into a clean glass and slid it across the mahogany. "On the house," she said softly. Ravenwolf took the glass. He did not drink immediately. He raised it slightly in her direction, a salute, a recognition of a fellow survivor in a hostile land. He drank it in one smooth motion, placed the glass down gently, and turned to leave. As he passed a table of card players, a man spat on the floor near his moccasins. Ravenwolf paused. His hand drifted near the knife at his belt. The room held its breath. Then he looked at Lily. She was watching him, her eyes pleading for peace. He released the tension in his shoulders and walked out. The saloon exhaled. The noise returned, louder than before, fueled by the adrenaline of a near miss. "You are playing with fire, Lily!" Dutch hissed. "That savage will scalp us all in our beds one night. He pays with silence." "Dutch, which is more than I can say for you," Lily replied, turning her back to him. In the far corner of the room, shrouded in the deepest shadow, a man sat alone. He had been there for an hour, nursing a single drink, watching. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and his coat was made of fine leather that cost more than most men in this room earned in a year. He was clean-shaven, revealing a strong, square jaw, and his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and currently fixed on Lily Hart. He was Gideon Cole, to the territory. He was a legend, the Gold Tycoon, the man who had turned the mountain range into his personal bank vault. Rumors followed him like a pack of wolves. They said he had bought the governor. They said he had flooded a mine to drown a rival. They said he had no heart, only a nugget of cold quartz where it should be. Gideon watched Lily wipe the bar. He saw the way she favored her left leg when she stood too long. He saw the faint silver line of the scar on her neck when she turned her head. He saw the fatigue that hung on her like a wet coat. And yet, she is still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, he thought. The thought surprised him with its ferocity. He remembered a girl in a calico dress by a creek, laughing as the water rushed over her bare feet. That girl was gone. This woman was harder, sharper. Her beauty had not just faded. It had been eroded by the wind and the grit, leaving behind something elemental and striking. The girls giggling in the corner with the painted faces were fresh flowers. Lily was the mountain itself. He had left this town a beggar. He had returned as a king. But looking at her, he felt the old ache of unworthiness rising in his throat. He took a sip of his whiskey. It tasted like ash. The tranquility of the saloon was shattered by the crash of a chair. 3 men had stumbled in from the street, already drunk and looking for trouble. They were drifting hands, hired guns for the cattle drive, smelling of sweat and entitlement. The leader, a man with a broken nose and a wandering eye, spotted Lily. "Well now," he slurred, staggering toward the bar. "Look at what we have here, a little long in the tooth. Ain't she? But I bet she still knows how to ride." Lily did not look up from the glass she was cleaning. "Go home, cowboy. You have had enough." "I will tell you when I have had enough," the man snarled. He reached across the bar and grabbed her wrist. His grip was bruising. "I want a song." And then I want a kiss. Right here. The room went quiet again, but this was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of men who wanted to see a show. No one stood up. No one moved to help. Dutch was suddenly busy counting inventory at the far end of the bar. "Let go," Lily said. Her voice was low. "Dangerous." "Come on, Grandma." The man laughed, pulling her harder, dragging her upper body across the polished wood. "Show us you still have some fire left in that old boiler." Gideon Cole's hand moved to the heavy Colt peacemaker at his hip. He started to rise, but he was too late. Lily did not scream. She did not pull away. Her right hand, hidden beneath the folds of her apron, moved with the speed of a striking rattlesnake. There was a flash of metal. A deafening crack filled the room. The whiskey bottle sitting on the bar, exactly 2 inches from the cowboy's left ear, exploded. Amber liquid and shards of glass showered the man's face. He yelled and stumbled back, releasing her wrist, clutching his ear. He looked at Lily with wide, shocked eyes. In her hand was a small, double-barreled Derringer. Smoke curled lazily from the barrel. Her face was completely devoid of fear. It was a mask of cold, exhausted fury. "The next one," Lily said, her voice ringing clear as a church bell. "Takes the ear off. Now get out." The cowboy looked at the gun, then at her eyes. He saw death there. He scrambled backward, slipping on the wet floor, and fled through the bat-wing doors, his companions tripping over themselves to follow. Lily lowered the gun. Her hand was trembling slightly now, but she hid it by shoving the weapon back into her pocket. She grabbed a rag and began to wipe up the spilled whiskey and glass. "The show is over," she announced to the room. "Drink up or get out." Slowly, the hum of conversation returned, tinged with a new respect. From the dark corner, the sound of slow, deliberate applause cut through the noise. Clap, clap, clap. Lily looked up, her eyes narrowing. The man in the fine leather coat stood up and walked into the light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and he moved with the arrogant confidence of a man who owned the ground he walked on. Lily looked at him. She took in the expensive boots, the tailored suit, the face that was handsome but hard as granite. She searched her memory, but she found nothing. The boy she had loved had been scrawny and smiling. This man was a monolith. "That was impressive, Miss Hart," Gideon said. His voice was deep, a baritone that seemed to vibrate on the floorboards. "I do not like waste," Lily said, gesturing to the broken glass. "That was good whiskey." Gideon stopped at the bar. He placed a gold coin on the wood. It spun and settled with a heavy ring. It was a $20 piece, more money than she made in a month. "For the whiskey," Gideon said. "And for entertainment." Lily looked at the coin, then at him. "I am not an entertainer, and I am not for sale." "Everything is for sale in Redemption Gulch," Gideon said softly. "It is just a matter of price." He looked at her, really looked at her. Up close, he could see the gray strands in her auburn hair. He could see the way her skin had thinned around her temples. He felt a sudden, fierce urge to touch her face, to trace the lines of time with his thumb. But he kept his hands on the bar. "Who are you?" Lily asked, a frown touching her lips. "You look familiar." "I am just a businessman passing through," Gideon lied. He was not ready to be the boy who left. Not yet. "My name is Gideon Cole." The name rippled through the bar. Heads turned. "The Gold Tycoon. Here." Lily stiffened. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. He was the monster who ate mountains. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice becoming frosty. "If you are looking to buy a mine, the assay office is down the street. If you are looking for company, the girls are over there. I am busy." "I am not looking for a mine," Gideon said. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. He placed it on the bar beside the gold coin. "And I am not looking for company." He leaned in closer. The scent of expensive tobacco and rain clung to him. "I want to see you and the owner, Jimmy, in the back office. Now." "Jimmy is asleep," Lily said defiantly. "Wake him up," Gideon said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Tell him the new owner of the painted mare would like a word." Lily stared at him, her mouth slightly open. You bought the saloon." "I bought the saloon," Gideon confirmed. "I bought the hotel next door. I bought the livery stable across the street. In fact, Miss Hart, I believe I own the chair you are standing near." He poured himself a shot from a nearby bottle, his eyes never leaving hers. They were blue winter sky blue, and for a second, Lily felt a jolt of recognition, a ghost of a memory. But she pushed it away. It was impossible. "Get Jimmy," Gideon repeated. "We have a lot to discuss. And bringing you a mop is not part of my plan for the evening." He knocked back the drink and turned toward the back office, assuming she would follow. That was the way of Gideon Cole. He gave orders, and the world obeyed. Lily stood frozen for a moment, her hand clutching the rag. She looked at the gold coin, then at the retreating back of the Tycoon. Anger flushed her cheeks, hot and sudden. He was arrogant. He was cruel. He was everything she hated about this hard, unforgiving world. But as she watched him walk, she felt a strange flutter in her chest, a dangerous spark that she thought had died years ago in the ashes of her youth. She smoothed her apron, touched the handle of the derringer in her pocket for courage, and stepped out from behind the bar. "Damn you," she whispered to the empty air. Then she followed him into the shadows. The back office of the painted mare smelled of stale cigars, cheap hair oil, and the sour sweat of imminent bankruptcy. It was a cramped room, dominated by a heavy oak desk that was scarred by knife points and stained with ink. Jimmy, the current owner of the saloon, sat behind the desk. He was a man whose face looked like a ball of dough that had been dropped on a barbershop floor. He was trembling. His hands shook as he reached for a glass of water, rattling the ice against the rim. Lily stood by the door, her arms crossed over her chest. She watched Gideon Cole. Gideon did not sit. He stood by the single dusty window, looking out at the alleyway where a stray dog was fighting a rat for a bone. He dominated the small space. His presence sucked the air out of the room, leaving Jimmy gasping and Lily feeling a tightness in her throat that had nothing to do with her corset. "It is done," Gideon said. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion. He turned and dropped a thick sheaf of papers onto the desk. The sound was heavy. "Final. The deed is signed. The transfer is complete. I own the building, the stock, and the debts." Jimmy swallowed hard. "Mr. Cole, I just want to say—" "You can go, Jimmy," Gideon cut him off. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "Take the back door. Your horse is saddled. There is $500 in your saddlebag. Do not come back to Redemption Gulch." Jimmy did not need to be told twice. He scrambled out of the chair, grabbed his hat, and squeezed past Lily without meeting her eyes. The door clicked shut, leaving a silence that felt heavy enough to crush bone. Gideon moved to the desk. He picked up the ledger Jimmy had left open and flipped it shut. Then he looked at Lily. "Sit down, Lily." "I prefer to stand," she said. Her hand was still in her pocket, resting on the cold metal of the derringer. Gideon sighed. He pulled the chair around and straddled it, resting his arms on the back. "Suit yourself. We need to talk about business." "I'm listening," Lily said. "But if you think buying the building means you bought me, you are going to be disappointed." "I quit." "I know you quit," Gideon said. "I expected nothing less. You have too much pride to work for a man you do not trust. And you certainly have too much pride to work here once the changes happen." "Changes. Renovations," Gideon said. "I am turning this place into a proper establishment. New paint, new tables, and new girls." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lily felt a cold flush creep up her neck. "I see," she said, her voice tight. "Out with the old, in with the new. Is that it?" "It is just business." "Lily," Gideon said, his blue eyes unyielding. "The men who come through here are young. They want bright eyes and smooth skin. They want girls who giggle at their jokes and do not look like they are calculating the cost of a coffin. You have been here a long time. I am 32, Lily snapped. I am not a corpse. In this town, 32 is ancient, Gideon said brutally. You are tired. Lily, I can see it. Your beauty is fading. The fire is still there, but the vessel is cracking. You can stay here if you want. I will not fire you, but in 6 months, you will be washing dishes in the back because no one will pay $1 to dance with the woman who reminds them of their mother. Lily felt like he had slapped her. The insult burned hot and sharp. She took a step forward, her eyes blazing. Your arrogance is astounding, she hissed. You walk in here with your fancy coat and your gold coins and think you can judge me. You do not know me. Do I not? Gideon asked softly. He stood up then, moving with a sudden intensity that made Lily step back. He walked around the desk until he was standing right in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the faint scar on his chin, hidden beneath the shadow of his jaw. I know a girl who used to sit by the Sweetwater Creek, Gideon said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. She had a ribbon in her hair the color of a summer peach. She told me she wanted to see the ocean. She told me she would never let this town swallow her whole. Lily froze. The room seemed to tilt. The air rushed out of her lungs. She stared at him, really stared at him, stripping away the years, the wealth, the hardness of his face. She saw the line of his nose. She saw the way his left eyebrow arched slightly higher than his right. Gid, she whispered. The name tasted like dust and ashes. Gideon. Hello, Lily, he said. The shock was replaced instantly by a tidal wave of rage. Lily's hand came out of her pocket, not with the gun, but with a flat palm. She struck him across the face with every ounce of strength she possessed. The sound of the slap echoed in the small room. Gideon did not flinch. He took the blow, his head turning slightly to the side. A red mark began to bloom on his cheek. You bastard! Lily choked out. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and furious. 12 years! You left me! You just walked away! I had to, Gideon said. He turned back to face her, his expression pained but steady. You promised, she cried. You said you were going to find a claim and come back before the snow fell. I waited until the food ran out. I waited until Silas came along and... Her voice broke. She touched the scar on her neck. Do you know what happened to me because you left? I know, Gideon said. His voice was thick with regret. I heard every rumor, every story. It haunted me every night when I slept on the cold ground. Then why did you not come back? Lily demanded. Why now, when you are a king and I am just broken furniture? Because I was a coward, Gideon admitted. The confession seemed to be ripped from his throat. I went out there and I starved. Lily, I dug holes until my hands bled and found nothing but dirt. I could not come back to you with empty pockets. I could not look at you and tell you I had failed. So I kept going. And by the time I struck the vein, by the time I had the gold, I thought it was too late. I thought you would have moved on. I thought you deserved better than a man who took 10 years to keep a promise. So you stayed away, Lily said bitterly. And you let me rot. I am here now, Gideon said. And I am not here to buy you. I am here to offer you a way out. He walked back to the desk and picked up a rolled-up map. He spread it out over the scattered papers. It showed the jagged peaks of the mountains to the west, marked with heavy black ink. I am building something, Gideon said, his business tone returning, though his voice was still raw. Up at Cole's Peak. It is not just mine. It is a city. I have 300 men up there digging out the heart of the mountain. But men need more than just wages. They need food. They need beds. They need entertainment. He pointed to a large square drawn on the map. I am building a hotel, he said. The Golden Summit. It will have crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, and tables where the stakes are high enough to make a man dizzy. It will be the finest establishment west of Denver. And I need someone to run it. Lily looked at the map, then at him. You want me to run a hotel? I need a partner, Gideon corrected. I do not need a 20-year-old girl who giggles. I need a woman who can stare down a drunk miner with a pickaxe and make him apologize. I need a woman who knows how to water down the whiskey without ruining the taste. I need a woman who understands that in this world, You are either the predator or the prey. He looked at her, his gaze intense. I am in a war. Lily, there is a man named Victor Maddox. He owns the copper mines to the south. He wants my claim. He has bought the sheriff, Clayton Briggs. He has hired thugs to sabotage my supply lines. If I show weakness, he will tear me apart. Gideon stepped closer again. I cannot trust anyone, he said. But I remember the girl by the creek, and I saw the woman in the bar today with that derringer. You are a survivor. Lily, you are tough. You are smart. And you are the only person in this God-forsaken territory I think I can trust with my back. And my fading beauty, Lily asked, her voice trembling with residual anger. To the world, maybe, Gideon said quietly. But I am not hiring you for your face. Lily, I'm hiring you for your spine. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. He placed it on the table. It clinked heavily. $5,000, Gideon said. An advance, plus 10% of the house profits. You run the floor. You manage the girls. You keep the peace, and in 5 years, you will have enough money to go to San Francisco or Paris or anywhere you damn well please. Lily looked at the bag of gold. It was more money than she had ever seen. It was freedom, but it was also a chain, binding her to the man who had broken her heart. And if I say no, then you stay here, Gideon said. You work for the new manager I bring in. You watch your reflection get older in that cracked mirror until one day you just disappear. He grabbed his hat. The supply train leaves at dawn tomorrow from the livery. Be on it, or do not. The choice is yours. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. I'm sorry, Lily, he whispered. For everything. Then he was gone. High above Redemption Gulch, the air was thin and cold. The wind howled through the pines, carrying the scent of snow and impending violence. Raven Wolf stood on a granite outcropping that overlooked the valley. Below him, the scars on the earth were visible even from this height. The mining camp at Cole's Peak was a festering sore on the side of the mountain. Smoke rose from the smelters, blackening the sky. The sounds of hammers and dynamite echoed off the canyon walls, disturbing the slumber of the spirits. This was the land of his ancestors. The bones of his grandfathers rested in the caves beneath the white quartz. The stream that flowed from the glacier was the lifeblood of the valley. But now it ran cloudy with silt and the poison the white men used to wash their rocks. He crouched down, touching the earth with his palm. He could feel the mountain trembling. It was painful. They come like locusts, a voice said behind him. Raven Wolf did not turn. He knew the tread of Black Elk, the elder of his small band. The man called Cole brings more machines, Raven Wolf said. I watched his wagons today. They carry timber and iron. They intend to stay. The spirits are angry, Black Elk said. The water tastes of metal. The deer have fled to the higher peaks. If they dig deeper, they will break the heart of the mountain. I will not let them, Raven Wolf vowed. He stood up, his face hard. This is our treaty land. The paper from the Great Father in Washington says this mountain belongs to us. Paper burns, Black Elk said sadly. And gold is louder than promises. There is another white man, the one called Maddox. His men were seen near the river yesterday. They carry rifles, not shovels. Raven Wolf's eyes narrowed. He knew of Maddox. He was a snake who struck from the grass. The white men fight each other for the yellow metal, Raven Wolf said. They are wolves fighting over a carcass, but it is our home they are tearing apart. He looked down at the distant lights of Redemption Gulch. He thought of the woman with the sad eyes and the fire in her spirit. Lily. She was different. She had shown him kindness when others showed only hate, but she was of their world, not his. We must prepare, Raven Wolf said. If Cole expands his camp onto the burial grounds, we will fight. I do not care how many guns they have. I will make the mountain run red before I let them desecrate the ancestors. The night in Redemption Gulch was noisy. The piano in the saloon clanked out a frantic tune, and drunken laughter spilled into the street. In her small room above the kitchen, Lily Hart sat before her vanity. The mirror was small and clouded with age. A single kerosene lamp cast flickering shadows on the walls. She leaned forward, examining her face. Gideon was right. The lines were there. The youth was gone. She traced the scar on her neck, remembering the pain, the fear, the hopelessness of that night with Silas. She opened the small drawer of the vanity and pulled out a wooden box. Inside lay a simple silver locket on a tarnished chain. It had belonged to her mother, a woman who had died of fever before Lily was 10. It was the only thing Lily truly owned. $5,000. She thought. 10%. It was a fortune, but it meant going up that mountain. It meant living in a camp full of rough men, far from the semblance of civilization she had clung to here. It meant seeing Gideon every day. It meant working side by side with the ghost of her past. He called me old, she thought, a flash of anger returning. He called me a fading flower, but he had also called her a survivor. He had offered her power, not charity. She looked around the room. The peeling wallpaper, the narrow bed with the lumpy mattress, the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a weeping eye. If she stayed, she would die here. Slowly, bit by bit. She would become one of the old women who swept the boardwalks for pennies, ignored and invisible. If she left, she might die too. The mountains were dangerous. Maddox was dangerous. The anger of the native tribes was a storm waiting to break. But at least she would die standing up. Lily picked up the locket and fastened it around her neck. The cool metal rested against her scar. She stood up and walked to the wardrobe. She pulled out her travel bag, a sturdy leather satchel that had not been used in years. She began to pack. She packed her 2 sensible dresses. She packed her warm shawl. She packed the bottle of liniment for her aching joints. And finally, she took the derringer from the table and wrapped it carefully in a silk handkerchief, tucking it deep into the side pocket of the bag. "Just business," she whispered to the empty room. "No love, no forgiveness, just business." She snapped the bag shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Dawn broke over the valley in a wash of pale lavender and cold gold. The air was crisp enough to freeze breath in the throat. At the livery stable, the supply train was assembling. 6 heavy wagons, pulled by teams of muscular mules, were loaded with lumber, crates of whiskey, and sacks of flour. Men shouted commands, their breath pluming in the air. Gideon Cole sat on a massive black stallion at the head of the column. He wore a heavy shearling coat and his hat was pulled low. He checked his pocket watch. It was 6 o'clock. His face was impassive, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the reins. He looked toward the end of the street. It was empty. "Mr. Cole, we are burning daylight." His foreman, a burly man named Silas, a name Gideon hated, called out. "Do we roll?" Gideon stared at the empty street for one more minute. A heavy stone of disappointment settled in his gut. She was not coming. He had pushed too hard. He had been too cruel. "All right," Gideon said, his voice rough. "Move them out." The foreman raised his whip. "Yeah, move on." The wagons groaned as the wheels began to turn. The mules strained against their harnesses. The convoy lurched forward, kicking up dust. "Wait!" The shout came from the boardwalk. Gideon turned in his saddle, walking briskly toward them, wearing a heavy traveling cloak and carrying a leather bag. Was Lily Hart. She looked tired. Her eyes were shadowed, but her chin was held high. She walked with a determination that made the mule drivers pause and stare. She marched right up to Gideon's horse. She did not smile. She did not offer a hand. She simply looked up at him, shielding her eyes from the rising sun. "You are late," Gideon said, though his heart gave a sudden, traitorous leap against his ribs. "I'm not late," Lily replied coolly. "You were early, and if I am going to run this hotel of yours, the first rule is that the coffee better be hot." Gideon fought back a smile. He nodded to the foreman. "Help Miss Hart into the lead wagon. She rides with the supplies." "I can ride a horse, Gideon," Lily said. "I am not an invalid." "The road is rough. Lily, save your strength. You are going to need it." She glared at him, but allowed the foreman to help her up onto the bench of the first wagon. She settled her skirts, placed her bag at her feet, and looked straight ahead toward the mountains. Gideon spurred his horse, and the convoy began the long, slow climb out of the valley. High on the ridge, concealed by the shadows of the pines, Ravenwolf watched them. He saw the long line of wagons. He saw the black horse of the Tycoon, and he saw a woman with auburn hair sitting on the wagon bench. His hand tightened on his bow. "So," he whispered to the wind, "she goes to the place of death." He turned to his warriors, who were hidden in the brush behind him. Their faces were painted for war. "Let them pass," Ravenwolf commanded. "Not for the man, but for the woman. She saved me from the wolves in the town. I will not let the wolves of the mountain take her. Not today." He watched until the dust of the convoy settled, then turned and vanished into the deep green silence of the forest. A shadow moving within a shadow, waiting for the blood that was sure to come. The journey from Redemption Gulch to Cole's Peak was not merely a change in altitude. It was an ascent into a harsher, more unforgiving world. The road was little more than a scar carved into the side of the granite mountains, winding upward through switchbacks so tight the mules protested with every step. For 2 days, the supply convoy battled the elements. The wind here did not just blow, it screamed, tearing through the canvas covers of the wagons and driving grit into eyes and teeth. On the second afternoon, a dust storm rose up from the canyon floor, turning the world into a choking haze of copper and brown. Lily Hart sat on the bench of the lead wagon, a scarf wrapped tightly around her face. Her body ached from the constant jolting, but she refused to retreat to the back of the wagon where it might have been softer. She sat beside the driver, a man named Silas Gideon's foreman, and kept her eyes on the ridge line. "You have sharp eyes for a saloon woman," Silas grunted, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "A saloon is more dangerous than a canyon, Mr. Silas," Lily replied, her voice muffled by the scarf. "In a canyon, the snakes rattle before they strike. In a saloon, they buy you a drink first." Her vigilance proved necessary an hour later. As the convoy rounded a blind curve known as Devil's Elbow, 3 riders appeared on the ridge above. They were ragged men, drift riders looking for easy prey. A shot rang out, kicking up dirt inches from the lead mule's hoof. The animal reared, screaming. The young boy driving the second wagon panicked, dropping his reins and freezing in terror. "Bandits!" Silas roared, reaching for his rifle, but the leather strap was caught on the brake lever. Lily did not scream. She did not freeze. In the chaos of braying mules and shouting men, she reached into her bag and pulled out the Winchester rifle she had insisted on borrowing from the armory before they left. She did not aim for the men. The distance was too great for a clean shot in this wind. She aimed for the shale overhang directly above their heads. She fired. The crack of the rifle was sharp and authoritative. The bullet struck the unstable rock face. A shower of stone and debris rained down on the riders, spooking their horses. The animals bucked, throwing the bandits into disarray. "Next one takes a hat off," Lily shouted, her voice surprisingly powerful against the wind. She worked the lever of the rifle, chambering another round with a mechanical precision. The bandits, realizing this was not a helpless train of terrified merchants, wheeled their horses around and vanished back into the rocks. Gideon rode up from the rear of the column, his black stallion lathered with sweat. He had his colt drawn, his eyes wild. He looked at the retreating dust, then at Lily, who was calmly lowering the rifle. "Is everyone all right?" Gideon demanded. "Just a few bruised nerves," Lily said, handing the rifle to Silas, whose mouth was hanging open. She looked at the young boy on the second wagon, who was shaking. "Easy, son. They are gone. Pick up your reins. We have a schedule to keep." Gideon holstered his gun. He looked at Lily, and for the first time since he had returned to town, the hard mask of the Tycoon slipped. He looked impressed, even proud. "I see you have not forgotten how to shoot," he said. "I told you, Gideon," Lily said, pulling her scarf back up. "I am not here to be decorated." The mining camp at Cole's Peak was a testament to the stubbornness of man against nature. It was a sprawling collection of canvas tents, rough-hewn log cabins, and mud. Everywhere there was mud thick, black slurry that coated boots and hemmed skirts. The center of the camp was dominated by the skeleton of a massive structure. It was the beginning of the hotel Gideon had promised. Currently, it was just a framework of timber with a large canvas roof stretched over the main floor to serve as a temporary gambling hall and saloon. It was chaos. Drunken miners stumbled through the mud. Fights broke out over spilled coffee. There was no order, no rhythm, only the frantic energy of men chasing gold. Gideon helped Lily down from the wagon. "Welcome to your new kingdom," he said, a dry note in his voice. Lily looked around. It was filthy. It smelled of unwashed bodies, rotting food, and sulfur. It was a far cry from the polished mahogany of the painted mare. "It is a pigsty," Lily said flatly. "It is a gold mine," Gideon corrected. "But yes, it needs a woman's touch. It needs a broom and a shotgun," Lily muttered. She wasted no time. Within 24 hours, the atmosphere of the main tent began to change. Lily Hart did not shout, but she had a way of looking at a man that made him check his manners. She hired 4 girls from the camp followers, women who had been washing clothes or selling themselves for scraps. She gave them clean dresses from the supply wagons. She gave them soap. She told them to stand up straight. "You are employees of the Golden Summit," Lily told them, her voice stern but kind. "You do not sit on laps unless you want to. You do not take abuse. If a man touches you without permission, you signal the bouncer. If the bouncer is busy, you signal me." She established rules. No guns at the card tables, no spitting on the floor. The bar closed at 2 in the morning, not when the last man passed out. The men grumbled. They called her the Iron Duchess, but they obeyed, because the whiskey was good. The cards were honest, and for the first time the camp felt like a place where a man could relax without watching his back. 3 days after their arrival, the tension that simmered beneath the surface of the mountain finally boiled over. It was midday. The sun was high and bright. Lily was behind the makeshift bar, counting inventory. When the noise of the camp suddenly died away, the hammer stopped ringing. The shouts faded. Lily looked up. Standing at the edge of the clearing, where the forest met the mud of the camp, was Ravenwolf. He was not alone. 6 other warriors stood behind him, painted for war, holding rifles and bows. They did not attack. They simply stood there. A silent, menacing reminder that this land had owners long before Gideon Cole arrived. Miners dropped their shovels and reached for their guns. The air crackled with the threat of violence. Gideon walked out from the command tent. He was unarmed, though his coat was open, revealing the holster at his hip. He walked to the center of the clearing, stopping 10 paces from Ravenwolf. "You are trespassing on company land," Gideon said. His voice was loud enough to be heard by everyone, but it lacked the venom that usually accompanied such words in the West. "This land has no owner," Ravenwolf replied. His English was accented but clear. "It belongs to the wind and the ancestors. You dig too deep. Gold man, you disturb the bones of the fathers." "I have a deed," Gideon said, "signed by the territorial governor. The governor does not speak for the mountain," Ravenwolf said. He pointed a lean hand toward the upper ridge, where the new shaft was being sunk. "That is sacred ground. If you cross the ridge, the earth will drink your blood." A miner near Gideon raised his shotgun. "Let us just shoot the savage and be done with it. Mr. Cole, hold your fire." Gideon roared, spinning around to face his own men. "The first man who shoots loses his job and his teeth." He turned back to Ravenwolf. The 2 men locked eyes, 2 alpha wolves circling the same territory. Gideon, the force of industry and progress. Ravenwolf, the force of nature and tradition. Lily saw the tension in Gideon's shoulders. She saw the finger tightening on the trigger of the miner's shotgun. One loud noise, one sudden movement, and it would be a massacre. She grabbed a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses from the bar. She walked out of the tent, her boots squelching in the mud. The sound was absurdly loud in the silence. She walked straight between the two men. She did not look at the miners. She did not look at the warriors. She placed the glasses on a flat tree stump that served as a chopping block. She poured the amber liquid. The glug, glug, glug of the bottle was the only sound in the world. "It is a hot day for a war," Lily said casually. She picked up one glass and held it out to Ravenwolf. The warrior looked at her. His eyes softened by a fraction. He remembered the saloon. He remembered the woman who had not looked away. "Lily," he acknowledged, nodding his head. "Raven," she replied. She picked up the second glass and handed it to Gideon. "Drink," she ordered Gideon. "Before you do something stupid." Gideon looked at her, annoyance warring with admiration in his eyes. He took the glass. Ravenwolf stepped forward and took his glass. He poured a small amount onto the ground, an offering, before drinking the rest. "The woman has a brave heart," Ravenwolf said to Gideon. "Listen to her. The mountain is patient, but it is not forgiving. Do not cross the ridge." He handed the glass back to Lily. His fingers brushed hers. His skin was rough, calloused like stone. "We will watch," Ravenwolf warned. Then, with a signal to his men, they turned and melted back into the trees as if they were made of smoke. Gideon drained his glass and threw it into the mud. He looked at Lily. "You took a risk," he said. "Someone had to," Lily replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "You and your men were about to start a war over a hole in the ground." "It is not just a hole," Gideon said, his voice low. "It is the future. It is their graveyard." "Gideon," Lily said, "you might own the paper, but you do not own the ghosts." That night, the wind howled around the eaves of the main cabin where Gideon had his quarters. It was a rough structure, but it had a fireplace and a view of the valley below. Lily sat in a leather chair near the fire. Gideon stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. "I hated him today," Gideon said suddenly. "Ravenwolf." "No." Gideon turned. "Myself, standing there, waving a piece of paper at a man who has lived here for 1,000 years. I felt like a thief." He walked over to the fire and poured himself another drink. He looked exhausted. The lines around his eyes were deep. "I became the gold tycoon because I wanted to be someone you could not leave," Gideon confessed. He looked at Lily. "I wanted to be so big, so powerful, that no one could ever take anything from me again. I stepped on necks to get here. Lily, I bribed officials. I undercut rivals. I told myself it was necessary." "Was it?" Lily asked softly. "I do not know anymore," Gideon said. He sat down on the hearth, looking up at her. "I have the gold. I have the power. But when I looked at Ravenwolf today, he had nothing. Yet he looked like a king, and I felt like a beggar in a stolen coat." Lily reached out and touched his shoulder. It was a tentative gesture, bridging the gap of 12 years. "You are not a bad man, Gideon," she said. "A bad man would have let his men shoot. You stopped them. I stopped them because I did not want to ruin the profit margin." Gideon lied, though his voice lacked conviction. "You stopped them because you have a conscience," Lily corrected. "The question is, what are you going to do with it? Do you need the gold, Gideon? Or do you need to prove you are not that poor boy by the creek anymore?" Gideon closed his eyes, leaning his head back against her knee. It was a moment of vulnerability that shocked them both. "I do not know how to stop," he whispered. "If I stop, Maddox wins. If Maddox wins, he will burn this mountain to the ground and kill every native on it." "Then fight him," Lily said. "But fight him the right way, not by becoming him." The peace did not last. Victor Maddox was not a man who waited for opportunity. He created it. 2 nights later, the makeshift saloon was packed. The fiddle player was sawing out a lively tune, and the miners were flush with pay. 3 men sat at a corner table. They were not regular employees of Gideon. They were drifters who had signed on 2 days ago. One of them, a man with a scar across his nose, kept eyeing the door. When a young native boy no older than 16 came to the back door to trade fresh venison for flour, as Lily had arranged, the trouble started. "Hey!" the scarred man shouted, standing up and overturning his chair. "We do not want no redskins in here." He grabbed the boy by the hair. "Let him go!" Lily shouted from behind the bar. Grabbing the shotgun she kept under the counter, but before she could aim, chaos erupted. The drifter threw the boy into a table of miners. Punches were thrown. Bottles shattered. It was a brawl, sudden and violent, clearly orchestrated to cause maximum damage. Raven Wolf, who had been watching from the edge of the woods, heard the commotion. He rushed in, not to fight, but to drag the boy out. "There he is," the drifter yelled. "The savage is attacking." He pulled a pistol. "No!" Lily screamed. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Raven Wolf stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. Blood bloomed dark against his buckskin shirt. The music stopped. The fighting ceased as the reality of the gunshot settled in. Gideon burst through the front doors, his own gun drawn. "Who fired? I said no guns." The drifter pointed at Raven Wolf. "He tried to kill me. I was defending myself." Raven Wolf stood tall, despite the blood seeping between his fingers. He did not speak. He looked at Gideon with cold, accusatory eyes. "Is this your honor?" "Goldman," his eyes seemed to ask. "Get out," Gideon said to the drifter, his voice shaking with rage. "Get out of my camp before I hang you myself." The drifter sneered but holstered his gun and backed away. The damage was done. The seed of violence had been watered with blood. Lily pulled Raven Wolf into the storage room behind the kitchen. It was quiet there, smelling of flour and dried beans. "Sit," she ordered, pushing him down onto a crate. "It is a scratch," Raven Wolf grunted, though his face was pale. "It is a bullet hole, you stubborn mule." Lily said. She tore a strip of clean cloth from her apron. She grabbed a bottle of high-proof alcohol and poured it over the wound. Raven Wolf hissed through his teeth, his body going rigid, but he did not cry out. Lily worked quickly, cleaning and binding the shoulder. Her hands were gentle, contradicting the harshness of her tone. As she worked, her sleeve rode up, revealing the old, white scar on her wrist, a companion to the one on her neck. Raven Wolf looked at it. He touched his own chest, where a jagged scar from a cavalry saber ran across his pectoral muscle. "The blue coats," he said. "5 years ago, they came to my village while we slept. They wanted the land for cattle. A gambler," Lily said simply, touching her neck. "He wanted me to be quiet." Raven Wolf looked at her. The barrier of race and culture thinned in that dimly lit room. They were two people whom the world had tried to break, and failed. "You have the spirit of a bear, Lily Hart," Raven Wolf said softly. "You protect the weak." "I just hate bullies," Lily said, tying off the bandage. The door opened. Gideon stood there. He saw them. He saw Lily's hands on Raven Wolf's bare shoulder. He saw the intimacy of the moment, not sexual, but something deeper. A shared understanding of pain that Gideon, with all his gold, could not buy. A spike of jealousy pierced his chest, sharp and hot, but he swallowed it. He saw the way Raven Wolf looked at Lily with respect, not lust, and he saw the way Lily looked at Raven Wolf with compassion. "Is he all right?" Gideon asked, his voice stiff. "He will live," Lily said. "But the bullet went clean through. He needs rest." "I do not rest in the house of the enemy," Raven Wolf said, standing up. He swayed slightly, but steadied himself. "This was a trap. Cole, that man was not drunk. He was sent." "Maddox," Gideon swore softly. "He wants a war so the army will come." "Then do not give him one," Raven Wolf said. He looked at Gideon. "Control your dogs, Goldman, or I will bring the wolves." He slipped out the back door, vanishing into the night. The morning brought the sound of hooves, heavy and authoritative. Sheriff Clayton Briggs rode into the camp at the head of a column of 12 deputies. Briggs was a thick-set man with a face that was turning red from too much whiskey and too much sun. He wore a tin star that shone too brightly, polished to hide the tarnish of corruption. He pulled his horse up in front of the hotel frame. Gideon and Lily stood on the porch. "Sheriff," Gideon said coldly, "you are a long way from your jurisdiction." Territorial law reaches everywhere. Mr. Cole, Briggs said, smiling a smile that did not reach his piggy eyes. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. "I have an order here from the governor," Briggs announced, loud enough for the gathering crowd of miners to hear. "It seems there have been reports of hostile savages attacking honest workers. Attempted murder. I hear it was a setup. Briggs, and you know it," Gideon snapped. "The law deals, in fact, Mr. Cole," Briggs said. "And the fact is, this region is unstable. The governor has declared the presence of the tribe on the upper ridge a threat to public safety." He leaned down, handing the paper to Gideon. "They have 7 days," Briggs said. 7 days to vacate the mountain and move to the reservation in the lowlands. If they are not gone by noon on the 7th day, I am authorized to use force to remove them." "This is their land," Lily said, stepping forward. "They have a treaty." Briggs looked at her, his eyes raking over her form with disdain. "Treaties can be rewritten, darling, especially when progress is at stake." He tipped his hat to Gideon. 7 days. Gideon, I would suggest you stay out of the way. Maddox sends his regards." Briggs turned his horse and led his men back down the trail. Gideon stared at the paper in his hand. The wind whipped the edges. "He is going to slaughter them," Lily whispered. "If they do not leave, he will kill them all." "And if I interfere," Gideon said, his face grim, "I lose everything. The mine, the hotel, my freedom." He looked at Lily. "What is 7 days worth?" "Lily." "Everything," she said. "It is worth everything." The sun dipped behind the peaks, casting a long, blood-red shadow over the camp. The clock had started ticking, and somewhere in the darkness, Victor Maddox was smiling. The Great Coles Peak Miners' Ball was a desperate gamble wrapped in silk and fiddle music, with the threat of Sheriff Briggs hanging over the camp like a thunderhead. Gideon had decided to throw a celebration. It was a show of force, a demonstration to the territory that his operation was civilized, stable, and not on the brink of a race war. Lily Hart had organized it all. She had ordered barrels of decent whiskey to replace the rot gut. She had hired a real band from Denver to replace the drunken banjo player. She had turned the rough-hewn skeleton of the hotel into a ballroom, draping canvas over the open walls and hanging lanterns from every beam until the mud and timber glowed with a warm, inviting light. In her room, Lily stood before the mirror. She had commissioned a dress from a seamstress in the valley. It was cream-colored, simple in cut, with lace at the cuffs and a high collar to hide her neck. It was elegant, far removed from the gaudy, low-cut feathers and satin she had worn at the Painted Mare. But the mirror was cruel. The soft cream fabric seemed to wash out her complexion. She saw the fine web of wrinkles around her eyes, the slight sagging of her jawline, the thinness of her wrists. She looked tired. She looked like a woman trying to play a part written for someone 10 years younger. Down in the hall, laughter drifted up through the floorboards. New girls had arrived with the latest supply train young things with painted lips and eyes that had not yet seen enough to be empty. "Did you see the dress the old lady is wearing?" A high, cruel voice floated up from the landing. "She looks like a wedding cake left out in the rain." "Hush, Pearl," another girl giggled. "She is the boss's pet. You know how it is. The old mare gets the warm stall while the fillies do the running. She is just holding on until he finds something shinier," the first voice sneered. "A gold digger with a rusted shovel." Lily gripped the edge of the vanity table. Her knuckles turned white. She closed her eyes, taking a steadying breath. "Business," she reminded herself. "This is just business. I am here to run a hotel, not a beauty pageant." She picked up her powder puff and dabbed at the shadows under her eyes. It did not erase the years, but it softened the blow. She stood up, straightened her spine, and walked to the door. The ball was in full swing. The air smelled of pine sawdust, roasting beef, and bay rum. The miners, scrubbed clean and wearing their Sunday best, whirled around the dance floor with the girls. It was a chaotic, joyous spectacle, a brief respite from the crushing labor of the mines. Lily did not go down to the floor immediately. She stood on the landing of the wide staircase, gripping the rough wooden railing. From here, she could see it all. She watched the youth, the energy, the reckless hope in the room. She felt like a ghost haunting her own life. She was the manager, the matron, the one who made sure the lamps were lit, not the one who burned. She unconsciously raised a hand to her cheek, smoothing the powder, trying to hide the fatigue that felt carved into her bones. "The view is better from up here," a voice said behind her. Lily turned. Gideon stood in the shadows of the hallway. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a stark contrast to the rough work clothes he usually wore. He looked powerful, imposing, and undeniably handsome. "I was just checking the security," Lily said, dropping her hand quickly. "Making sure the boys are not smuggling in knives." Gideon stepped closer. The lantern light caught the silver in his hair and the blue of his eyes. He did not look at the crowd. He looked only at her. "You look expensive," Lily said, a defensive edge in her voice. "And you," Gideon said softly, "look beautiful." Lily let out a short, bitter laugh. "Do not lie to me. Gideon, I heard the girls downstairs. I know what I see in the mirror. I am a faded photograph in a silver frame." Gideon moved then, closing the distance between them. He reached out and took her hand, the hand that was rough from years of scrubbing bars and holding guns. He ran his thumb over her knuckles. "Look at them," Gideon said, gesturing to the swirling crowd below with his head. "They are drunk on noise and cheap perfume. They see skin. They see the flash." He turned her hand over and pressed a kiss to her palm. "But I see the woman who stood between two armies with a bottle of whiskey," he whispered. "I see the woman who saved my life with a lie and saved my soul with the truth." He stepped in close, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated in her chest. "Her beauty faded with time," Gideon murmured, as if reading a caption written on her heart. "But to the gold tycoon, she was still the prettiest girl in town." Lily stared at him. Her breath hitched. She searched his face for pity, for mockery. She found neither. She saw only a fierce, unyielding adoration. It was the look of a man who had sifted through tons of dirt to find the one nugget that mattered, and having found it, would never let it go. "You really mean that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have never meant anything more," Gideon said. "The years did not take your beauty, Lily, they just carved it into something stronger." The music changed to a slow waltz. The fiddle cried out a lonely, sweet melody. "Dance with me," Gideon said. It was not a request. It was a plea. I have not danced in years," Lily stammered. "I will step on your expensive boots." "I have plenty of boots," Gideon said. He pulled her gently toward the stairs. They walked down together, and as they stepped onto the floor, the crowd parted. The whispers started, but Gideon ignored them. He took Lily in his arms. She was stiff at first, her body tense with the fear of ridicule, but Gideon held her firm. His hand was warm on her waist. He pulled her close, closer than was proper for a business partner. They moved. It was clumsy. Gideon counted the beats under his breath, and Lily missed a step, laughing nervously. But then, the rhythm found them, or perhaps they found the rhythm of the past. Lily rested her head against his shoulder. She smelled the soap and tobacco on his coat. She felt the steady thump of his heart. The mocking voices of the girls faded. The threats of the sheriff vanished. There was only the heat of his hand, the strength of his arm, and the terrifying realization that the ice around her heart was melting. The ball ended at 2 a.m. The last drunk miner had been carried to his bunk, and the lanterns had been dimmed. The main hall was empty, save for the scattered confetti and empty glasses. Gideon and Lily sat at a small table in the corner, sharing a bottle of the good wine Gideon had saved. The silence was comfortable now. The barrier between them had thinned. "That scar," Gideon said suddenly, looking at the high collar of her dress. "You always hide it." Lily's hand went to her neck, a reflex honed over a decade. "It is ugly." "Tell me," Gideon said. Tell me how you got it. I need to know. Lily looked into her glass. The red wine looked like blood in the dim light. His name was Silas, she began, her voice low. He came to town 6 months after you left. He was handsome. He had money. He told me I was too good for a mining camp. He said he would take me to San Francisco. She took a sip of wine. I was hungry. Gideon. Not just for food, but for hope. I believed him. I moved into his room at the boarding house. For a month, it was fine. Then he started drinking. Then he started losing at cards. And when he lost, he came home angry. Gideon's jaw tightened. His hand clenched into a fist on the table. He hit me, Lily said flatly. And when I tried to leave, he went crazy. He said I belonged to him. He grabbed me by the throat. He bit me, like an animal. He said he wanted to mark me so no one else would want me. I will kill him, Gideon growled, a sound of pure, primitive rage. He is gone, Lily said. I stabbed him with a hat pin. He ran, but the mark stayed. Gideon reached across the table and took her hand. His eyes were wet. I saw him, Gideon confessed. Lily looked up, shocked. What? I was coming back, Gideon said. 2 years after I left, I'd found a small claim. I had a little dust. I came back to get you. I saw you walking down the street with him. He was wearing a silk vest. You were laughing. You looked happy. I was pretending, Lily whispered. I did not know, Gideon said, his voice breaking. I looked at my dirty boots and my empty pockets. I thought, she has found a gentleman. She has found a way out. I felt small. Lily. I felt like the dirt under his shoes. So I turned around. I rode back to the hills. I told myself I was doing you a kindness. You were a fool, Lily said, tears spilling down her cheeks. You were a damn fool. Gideon Cole? I know, Gideon said. I let my pride cost you 10 years of pain, and I've spent every day since trying to fill that hole with gold. It does not work. They walked up the stairs to the private quarters in silence. The air between them was charged with the electricity of old wounds finally being exposed to the air. Gideon opened the door to his room. He did not invite her in. He simply stood there, waiting. Lily stepped inside. The room was warm, lit by a single oil lamp turned low. Gideon closed the door. He walked over to her and gently, with infinite care, reached for the buttons of her high collar. May I? He asked. Lily nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. His fingers were large but nimble. He undid the buttons one by one. The lace parted. Lily tilted her head back, exposing the jagged, pale scar that marred the smooth skin of her throat. It was an ugly thing, a map of violence. Gideon looked at it. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He leaned down. Lily expected him to touch it with his fingers. Instead, she felt the warmth of his breath, and then the softness of his lips. He kissed the scar. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of reverence. It was a benediction. He pressed his lips against the old hurt, as if trying to draw the poison out after all these years. A sob broke from Lily's throat. Her knees buckled. Gideon caught her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her flush against him. I am sorry, he whispered against her skin. I am so sorry. Lily clung to him. She buried her face in his neck, smelling the man, the regret, the love. It does not hurt anymore, she lied. Or perhaps it was the truth. He lifted her face. His kiss moved to her mouth. This time, it was not gentle. I was hungry. It was the taste of 12 years of starvation. Lily opened to him, her hands tangling in his hair. The desperation of the moment swept them away. They were two broken people trying to fit their jagged edges together to make something whole. They moved to the bed. The shadows swallowed them. There was no fumbling, no awkwardness of youth. There was only the heavy, deliberate passion of adults who knew that time was short and love was rare. Gideon worshipped her body, not as a conquest, but as a sanctuary he had been barred from for too long. And Lily, for the first time in a decade, allowed herself to be held not as a possession, but as a treasure, outside, in the cold darkness of the camp. A shutter clicked, or rather, The mechanical shutter of a mind took a picture. A man crouched in the branches of the pine tree near Gideon's window. He was small, wiry, and paid by Victor Maddox. He had seen the silhouettes merge. He had seen enough. By dawn, the camp was buzzing. The whispers moved faster than the wind. "Did you hear? The old saloon woman finally got her hooks in him. Slept her way to the top, just like they said. She is playing him for a fool, and he is too blind to see it." When Lily walked into the dining tent the next morning, the silence was absolute. Men looked at their plates. The younger girls, Pearl and her friends, giggled behind their hands, their eyes cruel and knowing. Lily held her head high, pouring coffee with a steady hand, but inside, the old shame coiled in her gut. She had thought the night was a private redemption. Instead, it had been turned into public currency. Worst news arrived before noon. A rider from the lower valley came galloping in, shouting that a supply wagon had been attacked. The driver was dead. The flour was spilled. "It was the Indians," the rider screamed. "I saw the feathers. They are attacking." Gideon stood on the porch, his face gray. He looked at Lily. They both knew it was a lie. Raven Wolf would not attack a food wagon. This was Maddox. "He is accelerating the timeline," Gideon said grimly. "He is creating the excuse Briggs needs." That evening, as the sun bled behind the peaks, Lily went to the stables. She needed to be alone. She needed to breathe air that didn't smell of judgment. She was brushing the coat of a mule when a shadow detached itself from the hayloft. "Do not scream," a voice whispered. Lily spun around. It was Raven Wolf. He looked tired. His bandage was stained dark, but his eyes were alert. "You should not be here," Lily hissed, looking at the door. "If they see you, they will kill you on sight." "They will try," Raven Wolf said. "I came to warn you. Lily Hart, the Snake Maddox has brought new men. They wear the clothes of the army, but they have the eyes of killers." "They say you attacked a wagon," Lily said. "I attack warriors, not flour sacks." Raven Wolf spat. "It is a trick. Sheriff Briggs comes tomorrow, not in 3 days. Tomorrow. Tomorrow," Lily gasped. "But he gave us 7 days." "He lied," Raven Wolf said. "They will come at dawn. They will say they are protecting the camp from my people. But once they are inside, they will take the mine. And they will burn the village." He stepped closer. "You must leave. Lily, take your man. Go. This mountain will become a grave." Lily looked at the warrior. She thought of Gideon, upstairs in his office, frantically writing letters to the governor that would never arrive. She thought of the night before, of the kiss on her scar. She realized then that she could not leave. She had run from her pain for 10 years. She had let people define her, old, faded, used. But Gideon had seen the truth, and Raven Wolf had seen the truth. "No," Lily said. Her voice was steel. "I am not going anywhere." "You will die," Raven Wolf said. "Then I will die standing up," Lily replied. "We have to fight. Raven, not just you. All of us. You, me, and Gideon." "The gold man will not fight the law," Raven Wolf said doubtfully. "He will," Lily said, a fierce light in her eyes. "Because I am going to make him choose. Between his gold and his soul." She grabbed Raven Wolf's arm. "Meet us at the canyon pass at midnight. Bring your men, but do not attack. Wait for my signal." "What signal?" "You will know it when you see it," Lily said. "Now go." Raven Wolf looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You are a strange woman. Lily Hart, the spirits walk with you." He vanished into the shadows. Lily stood alone in the stable. The smell of hay and horse sweat was thick. She touched the locket at her throat. The fear was there, cold and sharp. But for the first time, it was not the fear of being unloved. It was the fear of losing the love she had finally found. She turned and walked back toward the hotel. The whispers of the camp followed her, but she did not hear them. She was listening to the beat of her own heart, and it sounded like a war drum. The explosion did not sound like a mining charge. It sounded like the mountain itself had cracked open. The ground beneath the camp shuddered violently, knocking whiskey bottles from shelves and men from their bunks. A plume of fire and black smoke erupted from the eastern ridge, exactly where the powder magazine was located. Gideon Cole stumbled out of his cabin, pulling his suspenders up over his shoulders. His face was pale in the orange glow of the burning storehouse. Men were screaming. A timber beam had collapsed on a group of sleeping workers, and the air was thick with the smell of sulfur and burning pine. "Water," someone shouted. "Get the bucket line moving." Gideon ran toward the fire, his heart hammering against his ribs. He grabbed a shovel and began throwing dirt onto the flames, his mind racing. "It was the Indians," a voice bellowed over the roar of the fire. It was one of the new men, a hired gun named Stark, who had arrived with the last supply train. He was pointing toward the dark tree line. "I saw them," Stark yelled, his eyes wide with feigned terror. "I saw feathers. They threw torches and ran." The accusation spread through the panicked camp like the fire itself. Miners, terrified and angry, grabbed their pickaxes and rifles. "Kill them," a man screamed. "Drive them off the mountain." Gideon stood amidst the chaos, soot streaking his face. He looked at the destruction. 3 men were dead, crushed by debris. His life's work was threatened. The logic of the frontier told him that Raven Wolf had finally made good on his threat. "Get the horses," Gideon ordered, his voice cold. "If they want a war, they will get one." "No!" Lily Hart appeared from the smoke, coughing. Her hair was wild, her face smudged with ash. She grabbed Gideon's arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Gideon, look at me," she shouted. "This was not Raven Wolf." "I have 3 dead men." "Lily," Gideon roared, pulling away. "And a witness who saw them." "You have a liar who works for Maddox," Lily countered, stepping in front of him. "I saw Stark near the magazine an hour ago. He was not guarding it. He was piling oily rags against the wall." Gideon froze. He looked at Stark, who was now rallying the men, his hand resting too comfortably on his pistol. "Raven Wolf warned us," Lily said, her voice desperate. "He said Maddox would create an excuse. If you ride out there and kill those people, you are doing exactly what Maddox wants. You are finishing his job for him." Gideon looked at the burning wreckage, then at the angry mob, and finally at Lily. The firelight danced in her eyes, illuminating the fear and the fierce determination there. "He is right. Gideon," Lily said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. 12 years ago, you ran because you were afraid to fight for what mattered. Are you going to do it again? Are you going to let fear make you a murderer?" The words hit Gideon harder than a physical blow. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. "Sheriff Briggs is coming at dawn," Gideon said, the realization dawning on him like a cold sweat. This is the signal." "Then we have to stop them," Lily said. "Not here, at the pass." The canyon known as the Devil's Throat was a narrow slash in the earth, 5 miles below the camp. It was the only way up the mountain for a column of heavy riders. The wind howled through the rock walls, sounding like the screams of the damned. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Gideon, Lily, and 20 of their most trusted men who had been with Gideon since the early days, before the gold made him hard block the narrow road. They had overturned 2 heavy ore wagons to create a barricade, high above, on the invisible ridges. Raven Wolf and his warriors waited. They were shadows among the rocks, silent and deadly. Lily sat on a roan mare behind the barricade, checking the load in her Winchester. Her hands were steady. She looked at Gideon. "You did not have to come," Gideon said. He was checking the cylinder of his Colt. "This is going to get ugly." "I told you," Lily said, looking at him with a soft smile that defied the situation. "I am done being a flower on the wall. We are partners. Gideon, 50-50, that includes the bullets." Gideon reached out and squeezed her gloved hand. "If we get out of this, I am buying you that hotel in San Francisco." "If we get out of this," Lily said. "You are buying me a drink. A cheap one." The sound of hooves echoed off the canyon walls. Sheriff Clayton Briggs rode into view, flanked by Victor Maddox. Behind them rode 30 armed deputies and hired guns. They looked confident, arrogant. They expected to ride into a sleeping camp and slaughter a tribe of families. They did not expect a wall of oak and iron blocking their path. "Hold up!" Briggs shouted, raising a hand. The column halted. Gideon climbed up onto the overturned wagon. He stood tall, his coat flapping in the wind. "That is far enough." "Clayton!" Gideon called out. His voice was amplified by the canyon acoustics. "Get out of the way! Gideon!" Briggs sneered. "We have official business. We are here to apprehend the savages who bombed your mine." "There are no savages here," Gideon replied. "Only the men who actually set the fire." Gideon pointed a finger straight at Victor Maddox, who sat on a white horse, looking impeccable and bored. "It is over. Maddox," Gideon announced. "I know about the bribes. I know about the sabotage. And Miss Hart here has the letters you sent to your blasting crew. We found them in your foreman's saddlebag." It was a bluff. Lily had stolen documents, but they were financial ledgers. Not letters, but it hit the mark. Maddox's eyes narrowed. "This man is obstructing justice, Sheriff," Maddox said smoothly. "And he is conspiring with the enemy. Kill him." "You heard the man?" Briggs shouted, drawing his pistol. "Open fire!" The canyon exploded. Bullets slammed into the wooden wagons, sending splinters flying. Gideon dove behind cover as lead whistled past his ear. "Now!" Lily screamed. From the high ridges, a rain of arrows and gunfire poured down on Maddox's men. The ambush was perfect, the deputies panic-stricken, their horses rearing in the confined space. "Hold the line!" Gideon shouted, firing his Colt through a gap in the wood. Maddox, realizing he was trapped, screamed an order. "Push through! Use the dynamite!" One of Maddox's men lit the fuse on a stick of dynamite and threw it toward the barricade. "Move!" Gideon yelled, tackling Lily and rolling them both into the ditch by the canyon wall. The explosion shook the earth. The barricade was blown apart, sending burning wood and debris into the air. Through the smoke, Maddox's men charged. It was chaos. Hand-to-hand fighting broke out in the swirling dust. Lily scrambled to her feet. She saw a young warrior, one of Raven Wolf's scouts, who had been positioned lower down, fall from a rock ledge, shot in the leg. He lay exposed in the middle of the road, trying to crawl away as a rider bore down on him. Lily did not think. She vaulted onto her horse. She kicked the mare into a gallop, riding straight into the crossfire. "Lily, no!" Gideon screamed. Lily leaned low over the horse's neck. Bullets zipped past her like angry hornets. She reached the fallen warrior just as the rider raised his saber. Lily fired her Winchester one-handed. The rider was struck in the chest and fell backward. She slowed the horse, reached down, and grabbed the warrior's outstretched arm. With a heave of adrenaline-fueled strength, she swung him up behind her. "Hold on!" she shouted. She spun the horse around, galloping back toward cover. Maddox saw her. He saw the woman who was ruining everything. He raised his rifle, aiming for her back. Gideon saw Maddox. He saw the rifle. He saw the woman he loved in the sights. He did not hesitate. He broke from cover, sprinting across the open ground. "Maddox!" Gideon roared. Maddox turned at the sound. He fired. The bullet hit Gideon in the left shoulder. The impact spun him around, and he fell hard into the dirt. "Gideon!" Lily screamed. She slid off her horse, letting the warrior slide down, and ran to him. She fell to her knees beside him. Blood was soaking his fine coat. He was pale, gasping for air. "I'm all right," Gideon gritted out, though his face was twisted in pain. Just a scratch." Maddox laughed. He rode closer, using the sheriff's horse as a shield. The battle was winding down. Raven Wolf's men had neutralized most of the deputies, but Maddox still held the high ground of the saddle. "Look at you," Maddox sneered, looking down at them. "The great gold Tycoon, dying in the dirt for a whore and a savage." Lily pressed her hand against Gideon's wound, stemming the flow of blood. She looked up at Maddox. Her eyes were not fearful. They were burning with hatred so pure it felt like it could ignite the air. "He is worth 10 of you," Lily shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. "He may be a tycoon, but he knows there are things more important than gold. You are just a coward in a silk vest." Maddox raised his pistol, aiming at Lily's head. "Goodbye." Miss Hart. The sound of a bowstring snapping cut through the wind. Thwack! An arrow appeared in Victor Maddox's chest. It was fletched with crow feathers. Maddox looked down at the shaft protruding from his heart with a look of mild surprise. He dropped his gun. He swayed in the saddle, then toppled slowly to the side, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Ravenwolf stood on a rock ledge 20 feet above them, his bow still raised. He looked like an avenging angel carved from stone. Sheriff Briggs, seeing his paymaster dead and his men defeated, threw his gun down. "I surrender," Briggs squealed, raising his hands. "Do not shoot, I surrender." The shooting stopped. The only sound was the wind and the groans of the wounded. Then, a new sound grew from the valley floor. A bugle call. Gideon struggled to sit up, leaning heavily against Lily. "The cavalry," he whispered. Finally, a troop of federal cavalry rode up the canyon, led by a stern-faced captain. They had seen the smoke from the mine. They stopped, looking at the carnage, at the dead Tycoon, the surrendered sheriff, and the mixture of miners and warriors standing together. The captain rode forward, looking at Gideon. "Mr. Cole," the captain said, "care to explain why you are having a war on my territory?" Gideon groaned as Lily helped him stand. He was swaying, his face gray, but he looked the captain in the eye. "It is not a war, Captain," Gideon said, his voice weak but steady. "It is a correction." He gestured to the body of Maddox. "That man sabotaged my mine and incited violence. Sheriff Briggs was his accomplice. We, my partners and I, were defending ourselves." "Your partners?" The captain looked at Ravenwolf, who had descended from the rocks and was standing silently beside Lily. "Yes," Gideon said. "I am surrendering my exclusive claim to the upper ridge. I am petitioning the territory to recognize it as protected land for the tribe, in exchange for mining rights on the lower slopes. We have a new treaty, drafted tonight, in blood." The captain looked at the scene. He saw the corruption of Briggs, whom he had long suspected. He saw the unity of the people standing against him. "Get a medic for that shoulder. Mr. Cole," the captain said, tipping his hat. "We will sort out the paperwork in the morning. Take Briggs into custody." The sun began to rise over the canyon, painting the blood-stained rocks in hues of soft pink and gold. The soldiers were rounding up the surviving deputies. The camp doctor, a man named Dr. Miller, was tending to Gideon's shoulder. "It missed the artery," Dr. Miller said, packing the wound. "But you lost a pint of blood. You need rest, not speeches." Gideon sat on a rock, his arm in a sling. Lily sat beside him, her cream dress ruined, stained with dirt, blood, and gunpowder. She looked at him. He looked at her. Suddenly, Lily started to laugh. It was a hysterical, sobbing laugh, the release of too much terror. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the soot. "We are a mess," she choked out. Gideon smiled, a weak, lopsided grin. He reached out with his good hand and wiped a smudge of ash from her cheek. "I do not know," he whispered. "I think we will clean up all right." Ravenwolf walked over to them. He did not smile, but the darkness was gone from his eyes. He looked at Gideon, then at the dead body of Maddox being loaded onto a wagon. "The snake is dead," Ravenwolf said. "And the wolf is still standing," Gideon replied. Ravenwolf looked at Lily. He touched his own chest, where his heart beat beneath the buckskin. "You ride well, Lily Hart," he said, "for a saloon woman." "I ride well for a partner," Lily corrected him. Though she smiled, Ravenwolf nodded. He looked up at the mountain, where the sun was hitting the peaks. "The blood is paid," he said. "Now we heal the land." He turned and walked away to join his men. Gideon leaned his head on Lily's shoulder. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him exhausted. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "When you rode out there, you cannot get rid of me that easily." "Gideon Cole," Lily said, resting her cheek on his hair. "We have a hotel to run, and I expect that 10%. 20, Gideon mumbled, his eyes closing. "Make it 20. Lily held him as the morning light flooded the canyon. The beauty of her face was marred by exhaustion and grime. But as Gideon drifted into a painkiller-induced sleep, his hand found hers and held it tight. She was the anchor. She was the rock. And in the harsh, unforgiving light of the morning, she had never been more beautiful. The smell of the medical tent was a sharp mixture of carbolic acid, strong coffee, and damp canvas. Outside, the sounds of the mining camp had changed. The frantic, greedy rhythm of pickaxes hitting stone had been replaced by the purposeful noise of repair and reorganization. Gideon Cole lay on a narrow cot, his left shoulder heavily bandaged. His face was pale, the skin drawn tight over his cheekbones, but his chest rose and fell with a steady, reassuring rhythm. Lily Hart sat on a wooden stool beside him. A basin of warm water rested on her lap. She wrung out a cloth and gently wiped the sweat from Gideon's forehead. Her movements were slow and practiced, a silent echo of the night she had tended to Ravenwolf in the storage room. The circle of care had closed. She had healed the warrior of the land, and now she healed the warrior of industry. Gideon stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. The blue of his eyes was hazy with painkillers, but when they focused on Lily, they cleared. "You are still here," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "I told you," Lily said, dipping the cloth back into the water. "I have a 20% stake to protect. I cannot let my investment die of a fever." Gideon smiled weakly. "Is that all I am, an investment?" "For now," Lily said, though her hand lingered on his cheek. "Until you can stand up without groaning like a mule, you are just an asset." The flap of the tent opened, letting in a stream of bright morning light. The federal captain walked in, removing his hat. Behind him was a man in a dark suit, a federal investigator sent from Denver. "Mr. Cole," the captain said, "Dr. Miller says you will live to dig another day." "I intend to," Gideon said, struggling to sit up. Lily placed a hand behind his back to support him. "We have finished reviewing the documents Miss Hart provided," the investigator said. He held up the leather-bound ledger Lily had taken from Maddox's office. "It is quite a read. Mr. Maddox was meticulous in his corruption. There are detailed entries of payments to Sheriff Briggs, receipts for the dynamite used to sabotage your magazine, and letters drafting a plan to incite a massacre of the local tribe." "And Briggs?" Gideon asked. "Sheriff Briggs has decided that a life in federal prison is preferable to a hangman's noose," the captain said grimly. "He has confessed to everything. He confirmed that Maddox ordered the attack on the wagon train and the bombing of your mine." Gideon let out a long breath, the tension leaving his body. "So, it is over. The criminal case is over," the investigator said. "However, there is the matter of the land. Washington is concerned about the volatility of this region. They are not willing to let one man control the entire mountain range, especially given the recent violence." Gideon looked at the captain, then at Lily. He saw the resolve in her eyes. "I understand," Gideon said. "I never wanted the whole mountain. I just wanted what was fair." 3 days later, a table was set up in the center of the camp, right where the mud had been stained with blood only a week before. On one side sat Gideon, his arm in a sling, and Lily. On the other side sat Ravenwolf and 2 elders of his tribe. The federal captain sat at the head of the table as the witness. It was a strange gathering. The miners stood in a silent ring around them, watching. "The terms are as follows," Gideon read from the document, his voice strong despite his injury. "The upper ridge, extending from the Devil's Throat to the glacial peak, is hereby recognized as the sovereign territory of the tribe. It is protected land, no mining, no timber cutting, no white settlement." Ravenwolf nodded slowly. "The bones of the fathers will sleep in peace. In exchange," Gideon continued, "the tribe grants the coal mining company the rights to operate on the lower slopes, but this is not a claim of ownership. It is a lease. 10% of all profits from the lower mine will be paid directly to a tribal trust, to be used for the welfare of the people, for medicine, for supplies, for livestock." A murmur went through the crowd of miners. Sharing profits with the natives? It was unheard of. It was radical. "And the workers?" Lily added, her voice clear. "The men who dig the gold, they will receive a wage increase of 5% and a guarantee of safe housing. We are done building fortunes on broken backs." Gideon signed the paper. He slid it to Ravenwolf. The warrior picked up the pen. He did not write his name, for he had none in the white man's letters. Instead, he drew a small, sharp symbol, the outline of a hawk in flight. The captain stamped the document with the seal of the United States government. "It is done," the captain announced. Ravenwolf stood up. He looked at Gideon. "You are a strange white man." "Gideon Cole," Ravenwolf said. "You bleed like us. You fight like us. Perhaps, one day, we will be brothers." "We are neighbors," Gideon said, standing and offering his good hand. "That is a start." Ravenwolf took his hand. The grip was firm. The war for the mountain was over. The work of living together had begun. The winter snows began to melt, turning the creeks into rushing torrents of cold blue water. With the peace established and the mine operating under the new management of a trusted foreman, Gideon made a decision. He stood with Lily on the porch of the rough cabin, looking down toward the valley where Redemption Gulch lay hidden in the haze. "I am tired of the mud." "Lily," Gideon said. "The mud is where the gold is," Lily replied, leaning against the railing. "We have enough gold," Gideon said. He turned to her. "I want to go back, to town." "To the Painted Mare?" Lily asked, raising an eyebrow. "It is a rat trap." "Not anymore," Gideon said. "I have plans, big plans. I do not want a saloon where men go to forget their lives. I want to build a place where people come to celebrate them. A hotel, a real hotel, with glass windows, clean sheets, and a dining room where a man can take his wife." He looked at her intensely. "I want to build it with you, not as my employee, as my partner, my equal." Lily looked at the valley. Going back meant facing the ghosts of her past. It meant walking the streets where she had been shamed, where she had been old Lily of the saloon. "They will talk," Lily said quietly. "Let them talk," Gideon said. "We will give them something to talk about." They returned to Redemption Gulch in the spring. The town had not changed, but the energy had. The news of the battle at Devil's Throat had traveled fast. The legend of Gideon Cole had grown, and attached to it was a new legend, the legend of the woman who rode through fire. Gideon bought the lot next to the Painted Mare and tore the old saloon down. In its place, a new structure began to rise. It was built of brick and white timber, with a wraparound porch and large bay windows. They called it the Cole Hart House. The construction took 4 months. During that time, Lily felt the eyes of the town on her. When she walked to the general store, she saw the curtains twitch in the windows of the respectable houses. She heard the whispers in the street. "That is her," a woman muttered to her neighbor. "The one who lived with him in the camp. They say she seduced him to get his money. A saloon singer running a hotel," another scoffed. "It will be a brothel in a month." But not everyone whispered. One afternoon, a burly miner named Jensen, who had been at the barricade, stopped Lily on the boardwalk. He took off his hat and held it against his chest. "Miss Hart," Jensen said loudly, silencing the gossipers nearby. "My wife and I just wanted to say, thank you. If you had not pulled that boy onto your horse, if you had not stood up to Maddox, a lot of us would not be here. You have a tab at my house, ma'am, any time." And then there were the soldiers. The federal troops stationed in the town treated Lily with a deference usually reserved for officers' wives. They had seen her shoot. They had seen her bleed. To them, she was not a fallen woman. She was a veteran. Lily held her head high. She wore simple, elegant dresses, no more gaudy feathers, no more low necklines. She wore her age not as a defect, but as a badge of rank. It was a warm afternoon in late August when a lone rider appeared at the end of the main street. The town fell silent. It was rare for the mountain people to come this far down, especially a warrior in full regalia. Ravenwolf rode a paint horse. He wore a shirt of white buckskin, beaded with the colors of the sky and the earth. He rode straight to the unfinished porch of the Cole Hart house. Lily was standing there, supervising the hanging of the sign. Gideon was inside, arguing with a furniture supplier. Ravenwolf dismounted. He walked up the steps, his moccasins silent on the fresh pine wood. "Raven," Lily said, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "You are a long way from the ridge." "I came to see the house of stone," Ravenwolf said, looking at the sturdy brick walls. "It is strong, like the woman who builds it." Gideon came out, wiping sawdust from his hands. He grinned when he saw the warrior. "You are just in time," Gideon said. "We are testing the cellar." Lily went inside and returned with 3 crystal glasses and a bottle of fine Kentucky bourbon. She poured the drinks right there on the porch, in full view of the town. Ravenwolf took the glass. He held it up to the sunlight. "To the mountain," Gideon toasted. "To the peace," Ravenwolf added. They drank. The burn was smooth and warm. Ravenwolf looked at Lily. The afternoon sun caught the silver strands in her hair, turning them into a halo of light. "The mountain remembers your song. Lily Hart," Ravenwolf said softly. "The wind still asks where the voice of fire has gone." Lily laughed, a self-deprecating sound. She touched the lines around her eyes. "The voice is cracked, Raven, and the singer is old. I am better suited to shouting at cooks than singing to moons." Ravenwolf shook his head slowly. His dark eyes were ancient and wise. "You look in the glass and see the cracks," he said. "I look and see the vessel. The clay must crack to let the light out. People do not remember the face of the girl who danced. They remember the heart of the woman who stood." He finished his drink and set the glass on the railing. "Your beauty is not gone. Lily Hart," he said. "It has just moved inside, where it cannot be touched by time." He mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Lily standing on the porch with tears in her eyes that she did not bother to wipe away. The night before the grand opening, the Cole Hart house was quiet. The smell of fresh paint and beeswax polish filled the air. Upstairs, in the master suite that overlooked the town, Lily sat before a new vanity table. The mirror was large, flawless, framed in polished cherry wood. She wore a silk dressing gown. Her hair was loose, falling over her shoulders. She leaned forward, looking at her reflection. For the first time in years, she did not flinch. She saw the crow's feet. She saw the scar on her neck. She saw the softness of her chin. But she also saw the eyes that had stared down a tycoon and a killer. She saw the mouth that had negotiated a peace treaty. The door opened softly. Gideon entered. He wore his trousers and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. He walked up behind her. He did not speak. He simply looked at her reflection in the mirror. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his thumbs massaging the tension there. He leaned down, resting his cheek against her hair. "Tomorrow's the big day," Gideon whispered. "Are you ready?" "I'm terrified," Lily admitted. "What if no one comes? What if they still see me as the whore from the painted mare?" "Then they are blind," Gideon said fiercely. He turned her chair around so she faced him. He knelt down on one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. "I have traveled from the Mississippi to the Pacific," Gideon said. "I have been in the parlors of San Francisco and the ballrooms of Denver. I have seen girls with skin like milk and waists you could span with 2 hands. He took her hands in his. His palms were rough, warm, and solid. They were pretty. Lily, like dolls on a shelf. He reached up and touched her face, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheekbone. But not one of them, not a single one, was as beautiful as you were in that canyon, with dirt on your face and a rifle in your hand, screaming at Maddox. Lily felt a lump rise in her throat. "Gideon." "I do not love you in spite of the time." "Lily," Gideon said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you because of it. I love every year that brought you here. I love every scar because it means you survived to be with me." He leaned in and kissed her. It was a slow, deep kiss. It tasted of bourbon and promise. Lily felt the last of her defenses crumble. The walls she had built to protect her heart, the cynicism, the toughness, the self-deprecation fell away. She pulled him closer, her fingers tangling in his hair. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "You stubborn, foolish gold man. "I love you," Gideon replied. "You beautiful, dangerous woman." They moved to the bed, not as business partners, not as survivors of a war, but as a man and a woman who had finally found their home in each other. The moonlight streamed through the window, bathing them in silver, turning their imperfections into a landscape of love. The Cole Hart house opened the next day, and people came. They came out of curiosity at first, but they stayed for the food, which was excellent. They stayed for the beds, which were clean, and they stayed because the atmosphere was different. Lily ran to the floor with an iron fist and a gracious smile. She instituted new rules. Any man who used foul language was asked to leave. Any man who disrespected a woman was thrown out by Gideon personally. And most shockingly, the doors were open to everyone. 2 weeks after opening, a young native couple, a man and a woman from Ravenwolf's tribe, walked into the dining room. The silence was immediate. A few forks clattered to plates. The waiter, a young man from the east, looked unsure. He looked at Lily. Lily walked across the dining room. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor. She stopped in front of the couple. "Welcome," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Table for two." She led them to a table by the window, the best table in the house. She pulled out the chair for the woman. The tension in the room broke. The diners went back to their meals. A precedent had been set. The world was changing, and Redemption Gulch was changing with it. 6 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon when the hotel was quiet, Gideon walked into the dining room. He stopped at the door, smiling. Lily was sitting at a large round table. Around her sat 6 children. 3 were white, the children of miners. 3 were native children from the reservation on the ridge. On the table were slates and chalk. "A," Lily said, pointing to the letter on her slate. "A is for apple. And for arrow?" "A," the children chorused in unison. Gideon watched her. She was wearing her reading glasses, perched on the end of her nose. She looked stern, but her eyes were dancing. She looked up and saw him. She smiled a radiant, unguarded smile that took 20 years off her face. Gideon felt his heart swell. This was the woman who had thought she was discarded trash. This was the woman who had thought her life was over at 30. Now, she was the mother of a new town. She was planting seeds that would grow long after the gold ran out. The sun began to set, casting long golden shadows down the main street of Redemption Gulch. Lily, Gideon, and Ravenwolf stood on the wide porch of the hotel. Ravenwolf had come down to trade furs and had stopped to pay his respects. They looked out at the town. It was growing. There was a schoolhouse being built near the church. There were families walking on the boardwalk. The sound of a baby crying drifted on the wind, a sound of life and future. "It is a good town," Ravenwolf said. "It is a start," Gideon agreed, his arm resting casually around Lily's waist. "It is home," Lily said. She looked at the 2 men standing beside her, the Tycoon and the warrior, the past and the future, and she, the bridge between them. She touched the locket at her throat, the one Ravenwolf had noticed, the one Gideon had kissed. She felt the weight of her years, the ache in her joints, and the peace in her soul. Redemption Gulch was no longer a place where people came to hide. It was a place where they came to be found. And standing there, bathed in the dying light of the west, Lily Hart knew that she had finally been found. The steam whistle of the iron horse screamed across the valley, a shrill, mechanical cry that had long ago replaced the lonely howl of the coyote. It was 1905. The turn of the century had come and gone, bringing with it a new world. The dirt track that had once broken wagon wheels and spirits was now a paved thoroughfare. The rough-hewn timber shacks of Redemption Gulch had been replaced by brick storefronts with plate glass windows that reflected the civilized sun. There was a bank with marble pillars. There was a schoolhouse with a bell that rang every morning at 8 o'clock. And cutting through the heart of it all were the steel rails of the Union Pacific, binding the wild mountains to the cities of the East. Lily Hart stood on the wide balcony of the Cole Hart house. At 52, the years had finally claimed the last of her youth, but in its place, they had left something far more formidable. Her hair, once a cascade of auburn fire, was now almost entirely silver. It was pulled back in an elegant chignon, held in place by pearl combs. Her face was a map of her journey. Deep lines etched the corners of her eyes and mouth, markers of every smile, every sorrow, and every hard-won victory. Her hands, resting on the wrought iron railing, were thin. The skin was like parchment, spotting with age, and if one looked closely, they could see a slight, persistent tremor, the legacy of a life lived at high tension. But her spine was as straight as a rifle barrel. She looked down at the street below. It was a bustling scene of commerce and domesticity. A group of young girls, dressed in bright calico and lace, were skipping rope near the fountain in the town square. Their laughter floated up to her, light and carefree. 30 years ago, a girl laughing in Redemption Gulch usually meant she was being paid to entertain a drunkard. Now, these girls were laughing because the sun was shining and school was out. "You are brooding again, Lily." The voice was deeper now, raspier, worn down by decades of cigars and boardroom arguments. Gideon Cole stepped onto the balcony. He was an old man. The formidable bulk of the gold tycoon had shrunk somewhat. His shoulders, once broad enough to carry the weight of a mining empire, were stooped. He walked with a heavy cane, his left leg, the one that had taken a bad fall during the blizzard of '98, dragging slightly. But his suit was still immaculate, and his eyes, beneath the bushy white brows, were still the piercing blue of a mountain lake. "I am not brooding, Gideon," Lily said, not turning around. "I am supervising." "You are remembering," Gideon corrected. He moved to the small wicker table set up in the shade and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "Come and sit down. The doctor says my knees need a rest, and your hands need a drink." Lily turned and walked to him. The movement was slower than it used to be. The fluid grace of the saloon dancer had stiffened into the dignified pace of a matriarch. She took the glass. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was cool and dry, like old paper. "To the afternoon train," Lily toasted softly. "To the fact that we're still here to hear it," Gideon replied. They drank. It was a ritual, as sacred and consistent as the sunrise. Below them, the group of girls had been joined by a gaggle of boys. They were running a race, kicking up dust that settled on the polished boots of passing businessmen. Among the children, there were distinct faces, boys and girls with high cheekbones, dark eyes, and hair the color of raven wings, running alongside children with pale skin and freckles. They played tag, screaming in a mixture of English and the dialect of the Lakota. Lily watched them with a fierce possessiveness. "Thomas," she called out, her voice still possessing that smoky authority that could silence a room. A boy of about 10, with messy black hair and a torn shirt, stopped in his tracks and looked up. He was the grandson of one of Raven Wolf's lieutenants. "Yes, Miss Lily." "Did you finish your arithmetic?" Lily asked. "Yes, ma'am," the boy shouted. 9 times 9 is 81. "Good," Lily nodded. "Now stop pulling Sarah's pigtails, or I will tell your grandfather." The boy turned pale at the mention of his grandfather and immediately ceased his torment of the girl. Gideon chuckled, settling back into his chair. "You still terrify them. You know. They think you are a witch." "I am a witch," Lily said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I turned a beast like you into a husband. That takes powerful magic." Gideon laughed, a sound that turned into a cough. He thumped his chest until it cleared. "True enough." A shadow fell across the balcony door. Standing there, framed by the light, was a figure from another age. Raven Wolf was old. His hair was white, worn in 2 long braids wrapped in red cloth. His face was deeply lined, looking like the bark of an ancient pine tree. He wore a suit of dark wool, but he had refused the tie, wearing a turquoise bolo instead. He moved with a stiffness that spoke of old wounds, the bullet from the saloon, the saber slash from the cavalry, but his eyes were undimmed. They were black, sharp, and missed nothing. "The stairs get longer every year," Raven Wolf said. His voice sounded like dry leaves rustling together. "Raven," Gideon said, struggling to rise. "Sit, Goldman," Raven Wolf commanded gently. Waving a hand, I do not need ceremony. He walked over to Lily. He did not hug her, that was not his way, but he took her hand and held it for a long moment. You look tired, Lilyheart, he said. I am old, Raven, she replied. We are all old. Old is good, Ravenwolf said. It means the enemy missed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch made of soft deer hide. He placed it in Lily's palm. For you, he said. Lily opened the pouch. Inside lay a necklace. It was not made of gold or diamonds. It was made of polished river stones, dark and smooth, strung on a leather cord. In the center was a piece of raw turquoise, blue as the summer sky. From the high stream, Ravenwolf said. Where the water starts, it is the eye of the mountain. It watches over those who keep the peace. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She clasped the rough stones, feeling their cool weight. It was worth less than $1 in the city, but to her, it was more precious than the hotel itself. Thank you, Raven, she whispered. She fastened it around her neck. It rested against the loose skin of her throat, covering the faint white line of the scar that time had almost erased. The three of them sat on the balcony as the afternoon waned. They were a strange tableau, the wealthy Tycoon, the saloon woman, and the native warrior. 3 people who should have killed each other, according to the laws of the West. Instead, they sat together, sharing a bottle of whiskey and a silence that was comfortable and deep. Do you remember Maddox? Gideon asked suddenly, staring at the setting sun. The snake. Ravenwolf nodded. I remember the sound of the arrow hitting him. It was a good sound. I remember the fire, Lily said. I remember thinking we were all going to die in that canyon. We did die, Gideon mused. The people we were, they died there. The tycoon who only cared about profit died. The woman who thought she was broken died. And the warrior who hated all white men died. And we were born again, Ravenwolf said. Harder, smarter. He pointed down at the street, where the mixed group of children was now dispersing, heading home for supper. And because we lived, Ravenwolf said. They live. They do not know the hate we knew. They play together. That is the victory. Gideon Cole, not the gold. That... Gideon nodded slowly. Yes, that is the legacy. The sun began to dip below the western peaks, turning the sky into a bruising canvas of purple and orange. The air grew cooler. Ravenwolf stood up. The night comes. My bones ache from the fire. Will you stay? Lily asked. We have a room prepared. Always. Not tonight, Ravenwolf said. My granddaughter graduates from the teaching school tomorrow. I must be there to see her receive the paper. He looked at them both one last time. Walk well, my friends, he said. Walk well, Raven, Gideon replied. He left as quietly as he had arrived, a shadow slipping back into the world he had helped to shape. Lily and Gideon remained on the balcony. The streetlights below gas lamps that were slowly being replaced by electric bulbs began to flicker to life. Lily leaned her head back against the chair. She felt profound tiredness. But it was good. It was the exhaustion of a field fully harvested. Gideon shifted in his chair, turning to look at her. The dying light caught the side of her face, illuminating the wrinkles, the gray hair, the fragility of her age. Lily, he said softly. She turned her head. Yes. Do you regret it? Regret what? This, Gideon gestured to the town, to the hotel, to himself. Me. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had taken that money I offered you 30 years ago and gone to Paris or San Francisco? You could have found a younger man. A man who did not drag you into wars. A man who did not make you work until your hands shook. Lily looked at him. She looked at the man who had been her tormentor, her partner, her lover, and her best friend. She thought of the long nights building the hotel. She thought of the terror of the raids. She thought of the quiet mornings waking up beside him. She smiled, and the years seemed to melt away from her eyes. Paris, she scoffed gently. Paris is just a city. Gideon, I would have been just another woman in a silk dress, lonely in a crowd. She reached out and touched his face, her thumb tracing the deep groove in his cheek. Tush, she said, using an old word. There was a time, before you came back, when I looked in the mirror and saw a dead flower. I thought I was withered. I thought I was done." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But you, and Raven, and this stubborn, dusty town. You showed me that a flower does not have to be fresh to be alive. It just has to have deep roots." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I have lived, Gideon. I have fought. I have built something that matters. I have loved a man who was worth the trouble. Why would I trade that for Paris?" Gideon stared at her. His heart, old and tired as it was, beat a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He felt that same overwhelming surge of emotion he had felt on the night of the miners' ball, all those years ago. He reached out and took her hand, raising it to his lips. He kissed the knuckles, swollen with arthritis. "I told you once," Gideon whispered, his voice trembling with sincerity. "I told you that night on the stairs, when you were wearing that cream dress." "I remember," Lily said. "I was right," Gideon said. "I am looking at you now, Lily, with your gray hair and your shaking hands. And I am telling you," he paused, his eyes locking onto hers. "Her beauty faded with time." He quoted the old line, a smile touching his lips. "But to the gold tycoon, she was still the prettiest girl in town." Lily laughed, a soft, watery sound. "You are a sentimental old fool." "No," Gideon said firmly. "I am a man with good eyes. You are beautiful, Lily, not because of your face. That is just skin. You are beautiful because you never bent. You stood straight when the wind tried to break you. You stood straight when I tried to break you. You stood straight before the whole damn world." He squeezed her hand. "That is the only beauty that lasts. Lily, the beauty of the spine." Lily looked at him, and then she looked out at the town they had saved. She saw the lights twinkling in the valley. She heard the distant laughter of the future. She realized he was right. Her story was not the story of a damsel saved by a rich man. It was the story of a woman who had saved herself. It was the story of a woman who had refused to let the world tell her she was finished. She stood up, her knees popping slightly, and moved her chair closer to his. She sat down and rested her head on his shoulder. He put his arm around her, the heavy wool of his coat scratching her cheek. It was the most comfortable feeling in the world. "We did good, Gideon," she whispered. "We did good, Lily." He agreed. The sun vanished completely. The stars came out, millions of them, sharp and cold and eternal above the Colorado mountains. Down on the street, a young couple walked arm in arm under the gaslight. The boy pointed up at the hotel balcony. "See that?" the boy said to the girl. "That is them, Mr. and Mrs. Cole. They built this whole town." "She looks so old," the girl whispered. "Maybe," the boy said, repeating the legend he had heard from his father. "But they say she used to ride like a demon and shoot like a soldier. They say she saved the mountain." "She must have been beautiful once," the girl said. Up on the balcony, Lily closed her eyes, listening to the heartbeat of the man she loved. She breathed in the cool night air, smelling the pine and the dust and the faint, sweet scent of sagebrush. She knew the truth. She wasn't beautiful once. She is beautiful now, because beauty wasn't about the absence of scars. It was about the courage to wear them. And as the darkness of the Wild West settled over them, shielding them in its vast, indifferent embrace, the gold tycoon and the prettiest girl in town sat together, two ancient monuments to a time of fire and blood, finally at peace. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We have traveled a long road from the dusty floors of the Painted Mare to the quiet balcony of the Cole Hart House, and I hope Lily and Gideon's journey touched your heart as much as it did mine. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening to this story from. I love seeing how far these tales travel, and if you enjoyed this walk through the Wild West, please consider subscribing to my channel, Wild West Tales, and hitting that like button. If you really want to support these stories, please smash that hype button so we can share the spirit of the frontier with even more people. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your eyes on the horizon.